Do you subscribe to the idea that the greater the risk, the greater the reward?
The less the risk, the more people are willing to participate, and therefore typically the more diluted the reward gets. Now, can you do more evaluation than another person and you can look at the same thing and there not be as much risk as another guy takes? Yes.
Well, here's another one to follow that is, where's the line then when it becomes gambling?
Yeah.
Because there is a line, right? We go, oh, it's a big risk. We go, are you just gambling actually?
Welcome to Processing Purpose, a business and lifestyle podcast committed to having honest conversations about the stuff in our lives that is often suppressed, ignored, or overlooked. We are two brothers from very different backgrounds, but with one common goal. From entrepreneurship to relationships, from hobbies to house projects, nothing is off limits as we process becoming the best version of ourselves in business and life.
Haven't said this in a while.
Welcome
We're back. Oh, welcome back. Okay.
Welcome back. We're back.
You threw in a little twist there. I love it.
Sometimes you just got to mix it up.
I love it. What are we unpacking today? I'm actually really excited for this topic, and I'm a little surprised we haven't talked about it. It's a huge part of our life, and it's baked into the entrepreneur spirit.
Yep.
And capacity, and it's a big part of who we are. But it's an important topic.
Yeah, it's kind of a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
It's risk and the evaluation of.
Yeah, intolerance.
Yeah.
And I think for me anyway, the conversations I've had with others that are thinking about getting into business, when they ask what it actually looks like, what it means, they are not so interested anymore. I think a lot of people romanticize it, that you have all this flexibility and you get to do whatever you want. Eventually, that can be true for you. But I think it's really important to talk about risk and lay it out for people so you understand what we're tolerating on a daily basis. I was thinking about it the other day, and I don't have a regular 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
I don't. You don't. I don't. Business owners just don't. But we also have to worry about every single thing at 10:30 at night when we're trying to relax and watch a show, and we're cycling
real talk
conversations that we're having. We're cycling employee issues. We're cycling like, frick, dude, how am I going to make that move tomorrow? I don't even know if I'm going to get enough sleep for it tomorrow. All those factors come into our lives that, you just don't get to clock in.
You don't get to close
out.
the door and just leave it behind. And we try to.
Yeah.
Like I genuinely try to.
Yeah.
And just be like, all right, let's be with the family now. But you drag it everywhere you go.
Yeah, you do.
And when you layer in risk, I feel like the dragging increases.
Right.
Because there's a baked in anxiety to risk.
Right.
Depending on the gradient there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, I don't really know where to go with the conversation as far as like what questions to ask next. But when we talk about risk, when we talk about your risk tolerance, or maybe even scenarios in which you are evaluating that, what comes to mind for you?
You're gonna hate this answer, and I've said it a million times.
Great way to start.
Well, it's because we're so opposite in how we evaluate risk.
Sure.
We're very different in how we go about it. I go with my gut. I do a lot of the times, and I'm getting better at being more analytical about things and making sure I'm taking a conservative.
I don't hate that answer, by the way.
Yeah, it served me in some ways, but of course haphazard anything, it increases your chances for challenges and problems. It just does. So in some ways you learn more because you end up running into more problems. But it does require also, I really appreciate you sending me that video the other day. It does require expediency to some degree, right? Because if you're just going to go for it, you might not have all the nuts and bolts figured out yet. And so you're just go, and you have to be fast about it to get ahead, or at least consistent enough to get ahead. And like I said, it served me well. It's just how I'm designed. I feel like in many ways, it's hard for me to do it another way, So how about you?
Gut is a layer for me. Absolutely. And I think it's one we're going to unpack here, because it's an important part of the equation. But yeah, I'm a very let's break this down and let's look at as much as we can of the known of what this is going to turn into.
Right.
Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the math. Let's look at the environment. Let's look at things. And for me, risk taking is not about how much risk I can take. It's actually the opposite. It's how little risk can I take.
Sure. Risk management and
It's
mitigation.
Yeah, I don't think entrepreneurship, and this probably isn't a universal statement because I'm sure that there's definitely diversion of thought, but I don't think it's about taking risk. I think it's about how much action that you can take with as little risk as possible.
And even curbing luck to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm like myself, if I go for it, I have to rely on luck, kind of.
Yeah.
And if you take the time to methodically move through things, then you're not leaving things up to chance. And that probably feels really confident.
It feels confident, but the downside is that you're aware that you may not be moving as fast as you should.
Sure.
And so there's a blessing and a curse, right, to both things. You're talking about how going only with your gut has the downside of like maybe moving too quickly and not seeing the whole. Well, the inverse is also true.
Right.
By evaluating it, you can kind of get paralysis of analysis.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
And that it happens, and it happens to me, where
Right.
you just kind of go, I don't know, I've looked at this forwards and backwards. And that's where it comes in, and that's where the layer of gut or intuition does play a role, is you just have to end up at the end of the day going, this is what feels right.
Right.
Right. And you kind of go, okay, I'm going to trust my gut.
Yeah. And you got to in some ways carve the path.
Yeah.
Right. You might not see the path very clearly, but if you make enough mistakes, you'll look back and realize, whoa, I created that path.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just a part of it too. So risk tolerance and action, I think, are totally aligned.
Yeah. I think that those are definitely synergistic, movements, is that they have to be somehow in harmony, right? There's an element of action and risk that comes together, that you can make a more risky thing work by just taking explosive action and overwhelming
Right.
any downside that you have.
Totally. And anxiety comes from inaction. In my opinion, when it comes to business, if you're feeling anxious and stressed and maybe even fatigued, it's probably because you're either not doing it the best it can be done, or it's inaction. You're just not you're not doing anything. A lot of people will ask me, well, what do you do in real estate to get things going? And I'm like, just do something.
Yeah.
Like, there's no right or wrong answer here, right? And people look at me like, really? It's just that? And I'm like, yes. Pick up the phone and make 5 phone calls. If that's all you can do today, do that. Just do something. If you just sit around and do nothing and kind of hope for things to land in your lap, I know, that is a recipe for failure. It just won't work. You have to move. You have to keep moving and gain momentum with your business. You have to.
Yeah.
For sure.
Give me some real world. Let's make it practical. Give me some real world, examples of where you've taken risk, evaluated it or didn't, and it worked out, and if there's any that didn't work out.
Yeah, great question. And I think that question in and of itself is a bit of it's a layered one, because was it worth it? When we look back and we understand the learnings and the education that came from it, and who you become as a person because of it, you get stronger, a little bit wiser. It's always worth it.
Yeah.
Like I think I just shared with you and Holly in the car, there was a developer that said, if you make a buck and you learn something, it's worth it. And I really believe that. I think we all get caught up in like, did I make enough? Did I do enough? You did something. You of course you did. Like, you're learning, you're growing, we've said it before on the podcast, but when you go to work out, you feel weak, but you're actually getting stronger. It's that same type of philosophy in business that you just have to keep on keeping on. So I don't know if I answered your question clearly, but yeah.
Yeah, when I'd even go another step further than that developer. I would say even if you broke even and learned something, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Right? If you didn't lose money, and let's be fair, even in some situations, if you have the right perspective, and that's tough, even if you lose money and you learn something, it can be worth it. So
we pay for education.
We pay for education all the time.
Absolutely we do. What do you, okay, and you asked for real world. Real world for me right now is I invested, I don't know if I've shared this, but I invested in a small startup.
Okay.
Put some money toward it. And of course that's a risk in and of itself.
Yep.
I've never invested in anything like that in my life. More or less invested in me. Haven't even really gotten into stocks, to be honest with you. I mean, we made more safe 401k, IRA. We still haven't done the HSA, but we're going to get involved with that too. I don't know if you guys have done that, but I know
what it is. Yeah.
I really want to start filling that bucket too. But anyway, so I put, that investment there, which it wasn't a huge chunk of money. So I wouldn't say it's a risk in that if we lose it,
Right.
shit's going to hit the fan. That's not true. But I did take one step further and decided to join that development team. And so now it's a risk of time and energy because I'm working for equity. Right. And so so that could pan out and to be something great. It could be a complete waste of time and we get nothing, And so for sure a risk because I'm going to have to put a good amount of time and energy toward that. So that's very real right now. In fact, the contract's in my inbox. I got to review it today. So I'm in it. I'm in it and I'm signing up to commit myself to it. I'm excited about it. But of course, like anything else, when opportunity cost starts to rattle around in your brain, you start to question things and get paralysis by analysis. And I'm plagued, I think, with the constant question, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? I think I can do well in the lanes that I'm in, but I just want to make sure that I'm at least slowly moving toward my absolute purpose on earth. Am I there yet? I don't know yet. I couldn't say I am, but I think I'm moving toward it.
Have you defined your absolute purpose on earth?
I know what it looks like, but I don't know how to piece it all together yet. As we've talked about before,
Sure.
My ideas get to a 2 and then I'm like, I see it. I don't have no idea how to get there. I understand how to get there. It's just the actual logistics and how it plays out and how it impacts my family and that sort of thing. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
What can you talk a little bit, if you can? What was the risk evaluation process of this new venture?
Yeah, so I went to a presentation that she gave, and quite honestly, it was pretty rudimentary, if I'm being real. And I was kind of like, "Whoa, I'm surprised this isn't a more polished presentation." But she did it in a really basic and simple way, so much so that everyone could understand it. Because the original thought and idea was a pretty complex seller financing tool that she's created, and creating systems around that I still think can be incredibly valuable. Went to that, talked to Brooke. In fact, had a good friend of mine that I went to Alaska with, and he owns a small tech incubation business that's done extremely well. And he actually introduced me to her through a video. She created AI technology with a team that helps preserve native languages around the world. So it's a nonprofit that's still working and still doing its thing today. And learning that, knowing that, and then seeing her presentation, I'm like, this is a really, really smart individual. So when I looked at risk, I was investing less in the business, investing more into her, because I truly feel, even still to this day, that she has the skill sets to work through all the problems that are going to come at us. And I think she's a really good leader. She has an incredible ability to get people to follow her, and that's a skill set that's not baked into everybody. So I was really impressed, for sure. And then I saw bigger players in the room, right? Way bigger players than me. And I'm like, okay, if they're here, what could I be missing here? I got to pay attention. Not only that, but the reason I finally pulled the trigger and decided to invest was my friend reached out 3 times after the fund fully matured and said, hey, man, there's still an opportunity for you to get in on this if you'd like. I think you should think about it. And he's never done that before on anything. And I'm like, okay. Like, even I feel the spirit moving. To me, it's like, this is confirmation. God's just saying, the door's open, man. Like, step into this. And so I did. And so I don't know where all that's going to go, but I again kind of went with the spirit, my gut, and okay, like, even if it goes away and dissolves, I'm still going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it felt like a really calculated risk, to be honest with you. And then why I decided to jump in terms of development was I sat down with her in this office and we talked about the original idea. And then I said, hey, I'd love to share a few ideas I have that have been cooking around in my brain, and feel fairly convicted that operational software really needs to happen. And here's how I think it can play out. Here's what we've already done already. Here's how we can build it out in the next few months. And she got really excited. And it was just like, man, this can be married together, and let's get it going. So we just picked a brand name. Starting next week, we get into full on development mode. So let me wrap that up. I decided all of that because of how I felt. I again go back to, man, I feel like God really your brain is wired to just spread things out and see things from a 30,000 foot view pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like God, and we all have different gifts, but I feel like he's really given me I'm going to tell you when it's time. And when it's time, it's time, and it's time to move. And as long as I do, everything seems to work out pretty well. Is that pie in the sky stuff? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I believe it. And so anyway.
I mean, the reality of it is that our way is not right. It's not
just a funny way to say it.
Wrong.
Yes.
It's not. It just is.
Right.
And the way you evaluate things, and the way I evaluate things, and the way a listener might evaluate things. This isn't an advocation of this is how to think about it.
Right.
This is how we think about it. And if it's helpful, great. And if it's confirmation that you do it differently and it makes sense to you, great. Like, it just kind of looking at things and trusting your gut, and it's so personal.
Yeah.
It's so personal. So I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Do you subscribe to the idea that the greater the risk, the greater the reward? Or do you see it from a different lens of, no, actually, the more time spent calculating risk and making sure that you're hedging your bets every single time is the way to go?
Good question. I think in just terms of percentages, just pure math, typically the greater the risk, the greater the reward.
Sure.
The less the risk, the more people are willing to participate, and therefore typically the more diluted the reward gets.
Yeah, that's a great analysis.
I think that's just a function of math.
Right.
Now, can you do more evaluation than another person looking at the same thing and therefore reduce your risk profile based on knowledge, information, calculations, external factors, and you can look at the same thing and there not be as much risk as another guy takes? Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So the answer is maybe yes to both of those, right? I mean, just purely from a math standpoint, yes, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. But you can mitigate a lot of that by digging in and the connections that you have. And maybe you do end up having insider information because you know somebody that knows something that's third party and it ties in, and therefore you answer that one that's a big gap for everybody else.
Right.
And therefore it is less risk for you. So, I know that's not an answer, but it's an answer, right?
Well, here's another one to follow that is, where's the line then when it becomes gambling?
Yeah.
Because there is a line, right? We go, oh, it's a big risk. We go, are you just gambling actually? Like, this feels like my uncle said, if you invest in anything more than 10 years, it's an investment. Less than that, it is a gamble.
Okay.
That was his perspective, investing in stocks.
But let's look at gambling. If you go to the tables and know how the game works and you count cards, is it no longer gambling?
I don't know.
It's not, because you know the factors at play. That's why they don't allow it to happen. So you win. You're bringing to the table more information. You're bringing in more process to whatever the game is. And let's be honest, it's all a game.
So in other words, you're gambling until you know the process.
On some level.
So if you're a beginning entrepreneur, just understand that you're going to have to take time and assess, what you're deciding to do, but you're gambling. You don't know. You don't know the answer. You don't know how to win yet.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. I mean, how many times can you hit on a soft 12 and win, right? Or whatever it is. You figure out what those things are, and then you know when to make those decisions. And sometimes, and we've said it before, like, good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions. And sometimes that's the way you get that risk.
Yeah.
That's the way you evaluate the risk is, okay, it didn't work out this way. Maybe I'll do a little bit more research this time, or I'll dig a little bit deeper this time, or, whatever.
Right.
So, interesting question though.
Yeah. What do you have going on right now that has risk involved? Because I'm personally invested in this process with you.
Yeah. One of my things is, real estate, investing. And so I've dipped my toes into it, and have done some, and we've talked about hotel projects on this podcast as well. And I just got under contract, a week ago, 2 weeks? I'm not even sure. We're 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we're about 9 days, I think.
Something like that. An investment property to add to our portfolio. And it's still currently under contract. But there's an element of risk baked into this process. And we are taking a bit of a gamble. But there's a qualifier in there.
Right.
Because, this particular property has financials to back it up, even though they have been tailing off in the last 12 months. It has an incredible social following. It is a very iconic property in the Pacific Northwest. And, it's debatable whether or not I'm overpaying for it. And so you look at all these things and I'm going, man, yeah, this one came down to intuition for me. Because the math of it all, based on my cost of capital, okay, which is a factor for everybody, and everybody's cost of capital is different. But based on my cost of capital, meaning the money that I have to put into it, what it costs me either to take it out of, or what it actually costs me to use, that's what you refer to as cost of capital, is higher than most. So my cost of capital is higher, and so I have to look at an investment opportunity as it needs a little bit better return than the average.
Right.
And so based on my cost of capital, it's like break even. And that's where the risk comes in. Like, I don't need to take the amount of money that I'm taking for an investment that breaks even. That's not super helpful unless, like you say, you plan on just keeping it for 10 years.
And the cool part is it's forced savings nonetheless. So you're building equity every single time.
The way I choose to evaluate most risk is I look at it from a term in terms of like, what's the worst case scenario here? And if the worst case scenario is manageable, it doesn't have to be great, but it's not devastating.
Right.
If the worst case scenario is manageable, then it's worth the dice roll.
Yeah.
And for us, the worst case scenario, barring something completely out of our control, okay, which would be like, some sort of economic change that affects all of society, okay? None of us can plan for that.
No.
Nor can you decide to take risk or not based on that.
Right. Well, and too, I think it's important to look at your portfolio as a whole, meaning look at all of your assets. You got a hell of a deal on your first house.
Yep.
So when you look at the second purchase, you go, maybe there's a little wiggle room there, because if I look at my whole portfolio and average it out, I'm still getting pretty good deals.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. What do they call that? Cost basis averaging or something like that. I forget.
Yeah, there's some smarter guy than me figures that kind of stuff out.
There's a term for that. Dollar cost averaging. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, told you there's a smarter guy who figures that kind of stuff out. Not benefit all day.
So that's part of it for sure. But there is an element of like, okay, yeah, I could lose money on this deal. Does it devastate us? No, I'm blessed enough that that's not going to devastate us.
Man,
and
what a blessing.
Right.
Man.
And so that doesn't mean that it's not going to be painful and there wouldn't be adjustments.
Doesn't mean you're not going to be grumpy as hell.
Oh, I will be miserable to be around. Let's just be fair.
A lot of fishing will be wade fishing from a distance.
Yeah, you do not want to be around me while when you lose money. And it wouldn't be the first time that I've lost money.
You actually, interestingly enough, because you're cerebral, I think you actually are way more steady both ways than you think, right? And you've said that before. You're like, I would love to get super excited about something like you get, but I just don't. I don't get there. But the blessing there is on the flip side. When I get upset, I get really upset, man. I get down in the dumps. And you just hum right along, and you're like, I'm pissed, but screw it. I was going to drop F-bomb there, but I didn't. You're like, screw it, man. I'm going to keep riding, man. I got things to do. And so there's a blessing.
Yeah, it's and I think since this decision for me was I drew it all out. I don't know how many times I looked at the math on this.
By the way, since you've gotten into this project, your whole, regardless of the challenges and trying to sift through the analysis, Like your energy has lifted. I've noticed it.
Interesting.
I've noticed it. There's a sense of confidence. There's a sense of I'm doing this now. And that's invaluable. That's something that I haven't seen in you for a couple years.
Thanks for that observation. I'm not sure I've sensed that yet.
Well, because you're in analysis mode.
Well, and what I have noticed though is I haven't had it sounds dramatic. It's not this. A sense of doom. I haven't had the
buyer's remorse. That's very real.
The impending. You know, in the initial 24 hours after we submitted the contract, there was an element of buyer's remorse.
Very normal.
That was like, oh my gosh, we submitted. Are we sure we're really? Is this the right thing?
It's like bidding at a fundraiser. You're like, oh, did I actually win that?
Gosh, dang it! They're like, you won. I'm like, I won. I just paid $10,000 for that item, right, or whatever it is.
I gotta share this, by the way. At the auction I was at last night, there was a $500. You bid on this $500 silent auction toward the purchase of a car. I'm like, so you end up with a $50,000 bill? That's a horrible. Anyway, I just had to speak to that.
That's
a
horrible, really
auction.
odd item.
It's like, come here and spend your money. It made no sense. Anyway,
spend your money to get. No, that doesn't make sense.
Anyway, let's get.
I'd be curious what that. Anyways, that's a conversation off camera.
It was odd.
So yeah, there's not that sense of like, whoa, danger. It's a sense of like, okay, I think we're gonna. I mean, yeah, I told my son this the other day, and I'm trying to remember what exactly he was trying to figure out. Oh, we were talking about how much involvement in his race program he wants to have this year. So he's a ski racer. I'm one of the coaches, and he's in that phase right now of evaluation of going, do I want to be a ski racer, or do I just want to be a really good skier? And so we were talking about how much participation he wants to have, and does he want to do? He's committed to 2 days a week. They have it up to as many as 5 days a week, depending on how much participation he wants to have. And he's like, I just don't know. And I was like, you don't have to know. Like, sometimes there's just a decision.
Yeah.
And then you get the opportunity to make that decision right. It's not necessarily there's a right decision. And at this point in the game of this particular, it's like, we've made the decision. Now we got to make this right. Like, barring something that comes up through the diligence process that was entirely unexpected and, undisclosed, like, we're just going to make this right.
Yeah.
And there's an element of risk in this because we don't know all the aspects to make this property hum like it needs to. We have a sense of it, but you were talking about a level 2 to a level 10. I have a level 2 sense of it.
For sure.
Because I don't know. I haven't done, this is short-term rental. I've done plenty of that. But the social aspect that really is the engine to this particular property, I haven't executed on before.
Let me ask you a question. What challenge have you not risen to? I know your answer.
Only one in my life. And
you don't have to speak to it if you don't want to, but
yeah, just one. We've talked about it before, so you can go back and look at listen to another episode. But it was pursuing the Olympics in my late teens and early 20s. And I chose to walk away from that. And I look back on that and wonder if I needed to rise to a different occasion there. Outside of that, though, and I know you were going with that, I rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
I figure it out.
You do.
And I think, to be honest, I think that experience of questioning whether or not I made the right decision in my late teens and early 20s forces that, because I'm like, I don't want that doubt of was I capable and could I push myself further? And I think it actually informs you're gonna do everything you can now to figure it out.
You should share that with Van if you haven't already. And I think it's also to this point, I think it's so important that we as parents, especially dads, are careful to make statements to our kids like, hey, keep doing it until it's not fun. Because when you say that, what you're doing is you're now just putting a little antenna up for the moment that something gets hard or challenging or difficult, or they feel insecure or less than, they're gonna quit. Say, this isn't fun anymore, I'm done. The truth is that true character is built working through those things.
That's bad advice.
Yeah, it is.
Keep doing this as long as it's fun. Come on. That's not realistic.
Right. I'd say as long as it's still challenging. That might be the right way to frame it.
Yeah. I would say I love that, and I would say as long as you don't get up and hate it.
Yes.
At the point at which you're dreading taking the action.
Right.
and the outcome of that action is no longer motivating,
Right.
you're in the wrong lane.
Yeah, it's not serving you.
But it's not going to be fun all the time.
No. In fact, how many times even, we've talked about it briefly, but even
If you're talking about excellence.
yeah, even like social events, how many times even we know we need it, we know it's good for us, we don't want to do it, right? We're like, I don't want to go tonight. I'd rather just kick back and watch a show. But then you come back every single time and you go, man, I'm so glad I did that. That fed my soul. And it's the same thing with our kids to instill, hey, sometimes this is going to be challenging and hard, and there's going to be times where you don't want to go to practice and you don't want to show up and you want to sleep in. But I got to tell you that we are where we're at today because we worked through those things as kids. We did.
And I have to tell, we all do, but I have to tell my kids that all the time. And I think it's one of the valuable things of being involved in athletics, being involved in things that are fun, in air quotes, but have days that aren't, is that you get to have those conversations, whether they're involved in soccer or baseball or skiing or whatever it is. It's like, I don't want to do that today, Dad. I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
I know. But this is what we've committed to, and so we're going to do it. And that's at the stage that we're at right now. This is what we committed to it for this season. We'll reevaluate at the end. That's what we've decided to do, and that's what we're committed to. As they choose to, and that's based on like us putting them in activities. As they choose their activities, then it's going to be more a conversation around like, this is what's required.
Right.
If this is what you want to do. And I have that conversation with Van. He's talking about, I was like, what do you want your goals to be? And he came back to me, to be frank, with an unrealistic goal. And not that I have problems with unrealistic goals, but it wasn't even in the realm of like, yeah, that's a good stretch goal. That's a BHAG. I was like, can I give you some advice? And I had to bring him back down. I'm like, if you set that goal, here's what's going to be required. And are you willing to do that? Because that's what's required.
That was a great frame as a dad. Good job.
Yeah. And so we backed it down to what was something he could get excited about.
Did you send me that video about long-term goals where the teacher was?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be a great video to show Van. That's exactly right. Right. Let's aim for some short-term goals right now to see if we can get closer to it, but don't drown yourself in not accomplishing the thing you set out to accomplish. Smart goals really are important. You know?
Smart goals are important. And, the downside, some Van's now, just this, I'd say in the last 6 months, now starting to pick up the books that I leave around. And so that's been fun. He just knocked out the entire Elon Musk biography, all 700 pages of it, and did it in like 2 weeks. And he just picked up and finished another book that I was reading called Never Enough, from barista to billionaire. So he just finished that one. And so he is reading all these books, which is wonderful. But he also doesn't have necessarily the context for it. So when we were talking about goals in ski racing, he's like, you've got me reading these business books, Dad. And I remember reading, shoot for the stars, and if you miss, you'll land on the moon or something like that. And he's like, so I'm shooting for the stars. And I was like, yes, that's correct. But, and had to readjust. So,
yeah. And, that was a great example of framing for your kids, giving them a healthy sense of boundaries around their ideas and ambitions. I love all that. How do we as dads, I don't have risk-taking kids. I don't. They're pretty risk adverse. I don't know if risk adverse is the right word, but they're not jumping off of roofs and all that. I had some friends that did a lot of that crap. I didn't. A little bit, but my kids don't get into that kind of thing. They're not like wild and crazy. So how do I help them understand that there is a healthy risk that you should, move toward, and there's opportunities in that. And I think there's going to be opportunities throughout parenthood that are going to open up those conversations. But I'm naturally engaged with risk. I love it. In fact, I'm bored if there's not an element of risk involved. I love a little bit of risk. Brooke hates it. Would rather very much know exactly what's going to happen every single day. And for me, that's a slow death. So even as parents there, like, how do we navigate that to make sure my kids, I feel, need a healthy sense of risk?
Good question. 'Cause my kids aren't necessarily huge risk takers by default. I think I have fostered it a little bit. And so I appreciate the question because I think I can answer it just a touch. It's putting them in uncomfortable situations where they can fail and them realizing that they're stronger than they thought they were. And sometimes they do fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's good too.
Right.
Because now you get to have the conversation that it's not about the success every single time.
Right.
It's about the learning our limitations and learning, so I think that there's, when you say, they're not big risk taker, I think we got to maybe even zoom in a little bit and go, well, why? And go, is that a lack of self-belief? Is that a fear of getting hurt? Is that nurturing? Is that the environment? Is that so? Like, and each answer is probably going to be a little bit different for each kid. But what's at the heart of them not wanting to, and trying to create an environment where they have an opportunity to?
Yeah.
That won't hurt them.
Yeah.
And that might. I think, especially in today and age, and I see more of this from Holly than I see from myself, but there's a lot of like, be careful, get down off of that. You're going to fall. You're going to hurt yourself. And while all those things are true, I think on some level it bakes into our kids like, I don't know, my decision on what to do isn't grounded in reality. So therefore, I can't rely on myself to understand what to do. Someone else needs to tell me what to do because I can't evaluate whether or not I'm going to hurt myself here or not. And I think that perpetuates as we get older. And
the soft parenting, the helicopter parenting, in my opinion, so damaging.
It's so damaging. And like, let the kid stand up on the stool that swivels.
Like they're gonna fall down, they're gonna hurt their elbow, and they're gonna be okay. Like
they're gonna be all right.
Yeah.
They might break something. Yes, there's gonna be a cost to that. Will they learn that you don't stand on a swivel stool again? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's, you may not do that next to something that is hard and could crack a skull open, right? So there's still some balance to that. But allow them to get dangerous.
Yeah.
Get good with dangerous things. We drive cars.
Or even have a healthy perspective that those things that you think are so dangerous are not that dangerous.
It comes with experience, Ride a horse, shoot a gun, drive a car, ride a motorcycle. Get crazy.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there is danger in all of that. And yet we do it.
And and you hear one story and it totally shifts your parenting style. It does. A good example of that is sharks. People are freaked out about sharks. There are, on average, 6 shark attacks a year. 30 people a year die from dogs for different reasons, right? Being tripped by the leash, all sorts of weird reasons. I'm like, 5 times more deaths by dogs than by sharks, and we're freaked out because of Jaws probably. But nevertheless, it's like there's just sometimes an unhealthy perspective. It's like, well, did you hear that kid on the merry-go-round, he flew off and he cracked his skull open. He was in the wheelchair for 5 years or whatever. And you're like, yeah, but you didn't hear about the 999,999 kids that were fine and are okay still today, and I don't know, just a skewed perspective sometimes.
Yeah. And for example, one of Van's goals this year is he wants to start jumping cliffs on his skis. And,
oh, geez. Okay.
And so, he's watching the movies and he's seeing the kids that are, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, launching, going full send off of stuff. And he's like, I want to start doing some of that. And I'm like, okay.
Do you do that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But here's what it's going to require. And here's what it looks like, right? It always looks bigger when you're above it.
Going down, yeah.
It always looks bigger when it's standing in front of you.
Like 3 times as big.
When you're looking backwards, it never is as big. And I think that is a microcosm of risk.
Yeah.
I think that
good analysis on that.
When you're headed downhill, the ground falls away from you. So when you jump off a cliff, it's moving away. So it looks like it's much further than it actually is. And it causes most to stop.
Yeah.
But if you send it, all right, could you get hurt? Mm-hmm. Will you probably at some point? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But is it going to be as big as you think it was? It never is. And in fact, you'll look back up and go, that's all the higher it was.
Yeah.
It's looking backwards. It's never as big of a risk as it feels like looking forwards.
And that's where you connect those dots. Alex Hormozy said it, but I'm sure he's not the originator that fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. And that's to that point. It's like, man, you look back and you realize,
Yes.
oh my gosh,
I love that.
I could run through this.
Right.
You know what I mean? But here I am like,
Yeah.
It's back to that. Just start, if you're worried about risk, if you're nervous of failing, you're nervous of ridicule and being ostracized, it's an inch deep. And actually, I think the thing that keeps me, I'll speak by myself, that keeps me back from taking that big step forward is you can't be a prophet in your own town.
Yeah.
Is being ridiculed or having a perspective on you that, oh, you think you're a hotshot, you think you're a big guy, you're doing all this stuff now. No one cares. Like, I know that sounds bad. Dr. Seuss said, be who you are and say how you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. Right? That's so true. Like, people don't care, and the people that care about you, they don't mind if you want to go out and be yourself and be the best you can be, Yeah. And so we got to get back to that perspective again.
Yeah. So I want to do two things here as we kind of are moving towards the back half of our conversation here. I want to bring back around intuition.
Okay.
And then I want to talk about what's happening next. So,
okay. Yeah.
Intuition and gut. Okay. This is a significant factor for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people will allow it to be, it can be a significant factor for them. But I've heard it both directions. Man, I just trust my gut. And I've heard some people say, man, my gut's always wrong. How do you develop a trust in your intuition, in your gut? Where do you start with that? How do you grow it? Can it be grown? Is it a muscle that you can kind of foster? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Man, that's a great question. Yeah, I think intuition is definitely a muscle. I think it's a gift from God. I think it could be a full spectrum, meaning some people have a little bit of it, some people have a lot of it, and I think there's different reasons for that. I think cerebral people need feelers just as much as feelers need cerebral people. And so, for me, I think it hasn't, I don't know if this is the right way to say it. It's been successful enough to continue down this track of trusting more. And I think for me personally, I've spoken about it before, but I believe I have the Spirit of God in me. I really believe that. I know there's many, many Christians out there that believe the same thing. Believers, spiritual people, however you want to label yourself. And I believe it helps me determine and discern what is worth moving toward and what is not, or what's dangerous or what is safe. I've said, a lot of people will tell me, I just have this gut feeling. Go with it. You have to go with that. And do not question that, because when you do, more times than not, I think it can actually bite you in the butt. I don't know. I don't know how to expand on how to advise others to tap into that more. I found it to be so natural for me and so organic my whole life. I've actually, in the same light, revered those who take time and really pull things apart and get into the weeds with it. I get obsessed with things, so I get in the weeds with stuff, but not in a like methodically detailed approach. It's more like I'm going to do it and fail and figure it out and do it again and do it again and do it again. And I don't mind doing things over and over and over and over and over again. It doesn't bother me really. I get fatigued sometimes over a span of time, but if you give me a project and tell me I have 30 days to solve it, like doing it over and over, like an Edison kind of a philosophy, I think I could get into that. Like, that's kind of how my brain works. But I think, if you're a spiritual person, you could pray for that more.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I'm not a huge prayer warrior. I'm not going to sit here and tell you if you pray for it more and more, you're going to have it more and more. But I do believe that God responds to prayer in his timing and his will. And I feel like if it's something you truly deeply desire and you want more of, I think he will give it to you. I think he will bless you with that. What about you? I mean, you said intuition is a layer, but it's definitely not the bulk of it. So how do you manage that?
I think for me, I am building a confidence in it. And I think it's somewhat new for me to have a layer of turn the brain off. What is your body telling you? And because my analysis has always been my crutch. My ability to think through things and evaluate it just simply on what the spreadsheet tells me is where I usually go. And that's not always right. The spreadsheet isn't always right. And so not from a standpoint of is the math right or wrong, but from an evaluation of is it the right move or not. The spreadsheet doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
And so I feel like over the last 10 years, I have intentionally efforted to build a sense of intuition. I think it had to start with the awareness that it was even available to me for me to access. You have to be aware that it's even there.
Right.
And if we pause long enough to give it thought, we'll find it. Because I think it's there for everybody. And I think that might not be fair. I don't know that, but I assume it's there for everybody. And I think there is gradients of awareness to it, tapping into it. Like you, I believe that it is, in my life, the way the Spirit speaks to me. And so that could be referred to as, some sort of Holy Spirit, conversation that's happening on the inside, and other people just refer to it purely as gut. That's what my system's saying.
Right.
But I think it starts inconsequential. Like if you want to build a sense of what your body's telling you on the right or wrong, what the energy of it, from a very molecular standpoint, I think that's what's actually taking place. I think what's taking place, there's no science behind this thought process right here, by the way, other than it makes sense to me. Like we are energy. And within that, all items have energy. Whether it's this plant here on the desk in front of me, the microphone, and you. There's energy in all of it. It's what makes up everything. Therefore, there is going to be some sort of vibration, some sort of positive energy, negative energy, or neutral energy emanating from all things. I think that also involves the decisions that you make and the objects that you choose to purchase and the opportunities that you chase. There is energy in it all. And I think on some level, it's an internal sense of positive energy taking place.
Right.
Okay. But we can start to foster and tap into this on a inconsequential level. God, I feel like I should turn left instead of turning right. Don't know why, but I just have this sense. And so you turn left. And maybe you find out nothing. And maybe you find out that there was a car accident the other direction that you may have been a part of, right? Or, gosh, I feel like I should call this friend up. This friend hasn't crossed my mind in forever. But I just have this sense that I should call this person up. And you call them up and say, hey, I was just thinking about you. How are things going? And they're like, I cannot believe you just called.
I was just thinking about you, or whatever.
Yeah. Or it comes back to you later like, man, I needed that phone call in that moment. I was going down a dark place and you saved me.
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever it might be. So I think it starts with little things that seem like they are insignificant.
Right.
And we choose to ignore those things because we don't see how the dots connect.
Right.
We're like, oh yeah, I'll call Johnny tomorrow. Or I always turn right here. And you turn right and you find out that it was nothing. But I think on some level there's some testing that has to take place.
Yeah.
You have to kind of probe your sensitivity to this of like, am I hearing this? Am I feeling this right? Did this work out the way I was supposed to? And you're not going to get 100% confirmation. It doesn't work like that. But I think truly you'll get enough confirmation that you start to build a bit of a bias in there. You start to hear, oh, this is what my system says. This is what I feel. We call it gut because it's an internal stomach ache and or lightness emanating. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called gut.
Right.
It actually comes from inside.
It's like the pit.
Yep. And I think we start to build this sense of like, this is what it feels like when I should do it. This is what it feels like when I shouldn't do it.
Right.
And we can start to differentiate those things. And sometimes the line is super fine. And so that's when it becomes tricky.
Well, but I think you can also try to align it anyway with your right and wrong decision-making abilities, right?
Yep.
Like you have a moral compass inside of you. Where that comes from, I believe it's the Spirit of God. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but we all have it. We have this moral compass. So you can align those things, right? And just say, look, I know right and wrong, right? I have integrity. I know the difference between doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. So how can I expand that a little bit and go, how do I know this is the right business decision?
Yeah.
How do I know I'm, and to the video you sent me, the acting faster, how many times has it crossed your mind like, it'd be really nice to get Holly some flowers? And then it leaves your brain, you go about your day, and then you need to act on it right now, right? It's not about like, I'll get to that next week. It's, I'm going to do it right now. It just crossed my mind. And to that point, and one thing I wanted to say earlier about intuition that I think is really important is I really believe this. This isn't for everyone else to believe, but I really believe this. I don't believe your thoughts are your thoughts. I don't. I think you have your own kind of merry-go-round cycle of thoughts that are from your experiences and memories and all that kind of stuff, but a new, fresh idea that plants into your mind that comes from nowhere. I believe that's a gift given to you for you to decide to do something with or not, and acting faster on it typically is always better. And I think you have to be good enough to get lucky, right? I think what happens is we get into this mindset, one or the other. It's either I'd rather be lucky than good, or I'd rather be good than lucky. And I think we actually got to meet that in the middle and say, I need to be good enough to get lucky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's a real simple, and we've all been in this experience, example of listening to your intuition. Okay. Here's a really good one, because this has happened to every single one of you. So I was returning something to a store. This wasn't even a month ago. I bought it on sale. And I was returning it to the store. I had my receipt. I had the item. I had everything. I was taking it back to the store. And they handed me my refund slip, and they refunded me the full retail price, not the sale price. They refunded me $75 extra. And so this could be a number of different things. The cashier gives you too much change. Right? This could be, anything like that that's like
you got something
I could walk away.
deserve.
I could walk away from this.
Yeah.
Right? I could walk away from this, and your sense, you've got that pit, like,
I got to be honest here.
I could $75. I mean,
It's a big corporation. They make a lot of money. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
We've all justified it. And I've been on the other side of that and walked away with 2 extra pennies. Right? Is 2 extra pennies matter? No. So why does it matter? But here's what I did. He handed me the receipt, and I went, you refunded me too much money, man. I was like, here's what my receipt says. I was like, I paid $300 and whatever it was for this, and you refunded me, for whatever. And he's like, he looks at it and he goes, yep, you're right. Looks at his computer, starts tapping. He's like, my error. Have the $70.
He probably wasn't the manager. I'm just kidding. No, but no, that was.
He wasn't the owner, but he was the manager.
That says a lot. And actually, I was hoping you'd say that. I was hoping you'd say integrity is rewarded.
It is.
Yeah, it should be.
It is. And even if he just said you're right and corrected it, and I got refunded what I actually paid for it, I'd have walked out of there feeling great.
Yep.
Going internally, the energy's flowing, and you're like, that's what I needed to do. I knew I needed to do that.
It's a great reminder that you have the capacity to make the right decision and do the right thing. And when you remind yourself of that in action, invaluable for confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah, I'd never had anybody do that before, so don't expect that to happen. I've never had anybody, especially with an amount so much like that. Like, he went like, yeah, you're right. That's what the computer calculated. I'll have to bring it up with accounting. And I was like, okay. You're sure? He's like, yep. It was our computer system error.
Yeah, I didn't know how to reverse that.
I was like, okay. All right.
But good on you for doing the right thing. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's watching. That's the bigger piece is Always doing the right thing when no one's watching. Good on you. And a good lesson. And hopefully you find a way to share that with your kids. I think it's important for them to, if they don't see it, to hear about those things that their parents do out in the community.
Yeah.
You know, it may sound like it's bragging, but it's not. It's a great life lesson to share with your kids that, hey, I wanted you to know that I had an opportunity to do this. I did the right thing and I actually was rewarded for it. It's not always the case, but I want you to know that that's the decision that Dad made.
Yeah.
That might be really valuable.
Yeah, it might be. It certainly is a arrow in the quiver when those opportunities come up for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and speaking of intuition, we're having a bit of intuition around this podcast.
We are. So we've had some conversations, and honestly, for me, a lot of it's that gut.
Yeah.
A lot of that's that gut of, hey, we're going into a season here where you're taking on a new risk. I'm taking on a new risk. Our kids are just in a season right now where it's go, go, go. You're coming into ski season. We just decided, and I think you had probably even more a cerebral analysis of, hey, let's make better sense of all this, right, going forward, and let's make sure we're aligned on the big vision and why we're doing these things. And we loved every second of it, but we're deciding that we're going to trust our gut and take a pause. We're not necessarily saying it's done, but we're going to take a pause.
It's going to be the last episode for a while.
It is. And so, but we're really deciding how to recalibrate what we're offering to you guys. We think general conversations are fun and
we have a blast.
So fun between us, and obviously we set out for posterity's sake, and I think we've accomplished.
Which is the big thing.
Yeah.
For this was like a record of like a journal of big ideas.
Correct. And for our kids, grandkids, their kids, I think it's going to be so cool to pass those thoughts and ideas and experiences down. But I think we've accomplished that, and so we've just decided, hey, if we're going to add value and bring value to our listeners, to the public in general as we move forward, we just want to have a crystal clear vision and methodical approach to how we deliver that to you guys every time. And we want to be a little more effective about that. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to get back to the drawing board and make sure we have it spelled out and not just going with our gut.
Yeah. 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 So I think for now, this might be the end of Fireside Chats.
Yeah.
Right. I think, when we reappear, assuming that we do it under the processing purpose label, which, to be fair, it might not be.
We might rebrand. We might
rebrand. And there might be additional Fireside Chats that we toss into this podcast that feeds into that posterity conversation. This happened. We should really just do an episode on that. And so there may be an occasional episode release to kind of add to this posterity archive.
Right.
But I think ultimately, and both of us were feeling it, I've started feeling it about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like I'm losing some of my juice.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes down to not so much that this isn't fun anymore, but I'm starting to go, this is more effort than I'm willing to give.
And something we haven't done yet, and something I've learned through the coaching training I've been doing, is making it measurable. I think that's where we got kind of lost a little bit with this, was how will we know we've achieved what we've set out to achieve? And I think our next round, putting this back together, is going to absolutely have that, at least to the best of our ability, defined.
Yeah.
Right. How do we know once we've achieved that? Okay, now we know maybe to take the next step. But we kind of got lost in that a little bit of like, we want to make sure that when we're delivering something to you, it has value.
Yeah.
We don't want to just do it for us and to pat our own backs and all that kind of stuff. So we're feeling that deep conviction of, okay, now it's time to really package this up in a way that we're excited about, that gets you guys excited about what we're giving you guys. And it's going to be real awesome, life-giving take-home information that you guys can use day to day. We really believe that. So stay tuned. We're excited.
Yeah. And something that just dawned on me, I want to give permission, because when we started this, and I don't remember what episode it was, but at some point we were like, we're committed to doing 100 episodes.
We decided to go for it. And this is 50.
This one is 50. We've made it halfway. But sometimes even when you set a goal, you got to go, okay, it's time to make a change in that goal.
Right.
You don't have to stay committed to it just because that's what you said up front. Like sometimes there is an appropriate shift. Now, will we make 100 podcast episodes? Yeah, I believe we will.
Yeah.
Is it going to be on the processing purpose platform? I don't know.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
We will still stick to that, but we're going to take a step back, coming into the holidays as well. and going, yeah, let's put a pin in this one for now.
Especially when nothing's hinging on it, you know. I mean, when you set a goal and everything's hinging on that goal, you gotta finish that goal. You know,
Yeah.
you gotta complete it. But we put a goal out there just for a stretch purpose, and so we just decided, hey, let's get back to the drawing board and do this in a way that excites us again. So we're excited to do that, to take a little break and breathe a little bit, and just get into some of these new ventures that we've decided to commit to. But I think it's all for the right reasons.
I mean, we did it 2 years.
Yeah, 2 full years of podcasts. Really committed. I mean, it's actually, and any podcasters out there know, it's actually not so easy to stay very consistent, especially when you're got full-time jobs and running businesses and all that too. So, but it's been a blessing. It really has.
It's been awesome, and I've loved the conversations, and we have these conversations constantly. We just decided to record them one day.
Yeah.
So this isn't necessarily new for us. It's just new that it's being out there in the ether.
Right.
But I love them.
Yeah.
And I have been blessed by our conversations. You've challenged me. You've helped me grow. And I'm very grateful.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, man.
And thank you for you guys for listening.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we don't have a huge following, but those who have stayed consistent with tuning in, we
see you.
Really appreciate you. And hopefully what we've said along the way has helped you. Even a small nugget for me is worth it, all the time and energy we put in. So grateful for you too. We wouldn't have done it without you.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, man.
We're out.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to Processing Purpose. We hope you grabbed a few golden nuggets to take one step forward in your journey of life and business. Please remember to like and subscribe our channel if you'd like to get more content to help you build and grow everything around you. Make today your best day. Today is day one.